Okay, picture this. You're standing on a train platform, somewhere in the UK.
And of course, it's raining. Your train? Oh, that was due about 20 minutes ago.
And as you're standing there, you're thinking about how you've been working harder than ever, right? But your bank account, it looks pretty much the same as it did, what, a decade ago? Actually, when you factor in inflation, you're probably poorer.
And you just get this sinking feeling, that the country isn't just going through a rough patch. It feels like something is properly, fundamentally broken. And hey, if you've ever felt that way, trust me, you are not alone.
So let's get into it. We're going to perform a kind of autopsy on the UK economy to figure out what exactly has gone so wrong. Here's the plan. We'll break it down into 5 parts. First, the Great Stagnation. Then, the housing hostage situation. After that, we'll look at a decade of scars, the systemic strains on the economy, and finally, we're going to ask the big one. Is the British dream even a thing anymore?
All right, part 1, the Great Stagnation. Honestly, this is the heart of the whole issue. It's what people in the know call the productivity puzzle, and it basically answers the question you've probably been asking yourself, why am I not getting any richer?
So, have a look at this number. £11,000. What on earth is that about?
Well, get this. That is the extra cash the average worker, you, would be taking home every single year if the UK's economy had just kept chugging along like it did before 2008. That's not just a statistic. That's the real cost, in your pocket, of this stagnation.
And this slide really breaks it down perfectly. Let's imagine 2 workers. You've got Pierre over in France. His company shelled out for fancy high-tech tools, so he's churning out 100 widgets an hour. And you know what? He gets paid well for it. Then you've got Barry here in the UK. His company did the math and figured it's cheaper to just hire a few more blokes than to invest in a decent machine. So Barry's working flat out, but he's only making 20 widgets an hour. And that right there is the UK economy in a nutshell. It's a low investment, low wage trap.
Okay, let's move on to the second part of our diagnosis, and you'll see how this all connects. We're calling this the housing hostage situation, because if low productivity is the quiet poison, housing is the problem screaming in your face.
So where does this all come from? Well, you can trace a lot of it back to this one law, the Town and Country Planning Act of 1947. It basically handed over the right to build anything to local councils. And who often runs those councils? People who already own their homes and, frankly, don't want a load of new houses built down the road. It gave them a massive veto power.
And just look at the result. Back in the 90s, the average house cost about 4 times what the average person earned in a year. Today, it's more than 8 times. This isn't just making it hard to get on the ladder, it's a disaster. It stops talented people from moving for jobs, sucks money out of businesses that could be growing, and it's basically a massive wealth transfer from the young to the old.
And if you need any more proof of how backwards our priorities are, just read this. In Surrey, golf courses take up more space than houses do. Think about that. We've literally prioritized a game over homes for the people who actually keep the country going. The UK has basically become a giant housing market that happens to have a country attached to it.
So you've got a productivity crisis and a housing crisis. A perfect storm, right? So what happened next? Well, that brings us to part 3, a decade of scars. Or, as some call it, the austerity experiment. Now, the idea on paper was simple enough. Slash public spending to pay down the national debt, kind of like a family tightening its belt. The problem is, a country's economy isn't like a family's budget. And what it actually created was this vicious cycle, a doom loop. The government cuts spending, so people lose their jobs or their income drops. Then, those people spend less money, which means the government gets less back in taxes. So what does it do? It cuts spending again.
And the impact in the real world? Well, just look at the NHS. Years and years of funding not keeping up with demand has led to this. Waiting lists with more than 7 million people on them. And here's the economic kicker. If a massive slice of your workforce is too sick to actually work, your economy is going nowhere.
This quote just hits the nail on the head, doesn't it? Austerity didn't just trim the fat, it cut into the muscle and bone. We tried to save a few quid in the short term, and now we're paying out billions just to try and patch things up. It's like we stopped doing basic maintenance on the country, and now we're all living with the consequences.
All right, next up, let's talk about the big systemic strains that were like pouring sand into the engine of an already struggling economy. We're talking Brexit and the demographic time bomb.
Let's start with this number, 4%. Doesn't sound like a huge deal, does it?
But that 4% is the long-term dent in the UK's potential growth, all because of Brexit.
And that's not my opinion. That's according to the government's own watchdog, the Office for Budget Responsibility. In real money, that's a hit of about £100 billion a year. £100 billion! All the new red tape and the years of not knowing what was going on just meant businesses put their wallets away and stopped investing.
And at the exact same time, you've got this demographic time bomb ticking away. Think about policies like the triple lock for pensions. It guarantees they go up by a generous amount every year, which is great for pensioners, but what about everyone else? Well, the working population has seen their wages basically flatline for 15 years. And we've now reached this incredible point where, for the first time ever, the average pensioner is actually less likely to be in poverty than the average working-age family. It's a massive, massive shift of wealth from the young to the old.
So, all of this, the stagnation, the housing crisis, the austerity scars, Brexit, it all brings us to one final, really big question. Is the British dream dead?
So, how do we fix this mess? Well, the path to recovery means facing some really hard truths. We're talking about completely overhauling the planning laws to build millions of homes, actually investing for the long term in things like infrastructure and tech instead of constantly cutting, trying to fix the trade relationship with Europe, and maybe even changing how we tax, focusing more on wealth and less on work. Look, none of it is easy. It's a massive job.
And that really leaves us with this final thought. That old promise, that unwritten rule that if you work hard and play by the rules, your kids will have a better life than you did, well, it feels like that promise has been broken. But understanding why it's broken is the first step to fixing it. So I'll leave you with this to think about. If you had the power to change just one single law to start turning the UK economy around, what would it be?